Welcome. It's exciting to have you here for the first of the Fast Forward lectures for this season, for the semester. We're really excited to be kind of restarting these lectures in a very kind of full-on in-person thing to try and kind of set the pandemic behind us. And so welcome, welcome to this new building, Building 201. It's the newest building on the campus, designed by the lovely folks at Jasmax, full of love for the University of Auckland. We appreciate all of the work that they've done for us. One of the things that we're most grateful for in relation to this lecture series is the ongoing, long-term and very generous support that JIB have provided to the school to run these lectures. We couldn't do this lecture series without them. It allows us to be really kind of ambitious and to be very generous on their behalf. So I wonder if you would welcome Arima Black from JIB.
We'd just like to say a massive thanks to the University of Auckland and Andrew Barrett. What a fantastic lecture series this is going to be. The first, three look absolutely fantastic. What a great turnout we have here tonight as well. So thank you guys all very much for your ongoing support. Helps us help you guys back as well. So it's all part of it. It's very exciting. I saw Andrew many years ago. I believe it was another one of these University of Aucklands as well, when I was up in the stands with you guys, and mesmerising conversation and kind of philosophy in behind there. So great to have yourself, Andrew, and Sophie here as well. And from us, it's just a massive thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. Great.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
So thank you again very much to JIB. We are hugely reliant on what they do for us. So my request to you is to, when you get into the office in the morning, pull out one of the projects and specify an extra layer somewhere in one of your projects. It's great for sound. Bit of mess in the walls. The younger ones here, so welcoming you to Andrew's lecture, the younger ones will know Andrew through his kind of fantastic social media presence, Archie Marathon, charging around buildings of the world and unlocking their secrets for us. Older folk will know Andrew as a previous speaker, a great friend to New Zealand architecture, and he's been here a number of times speaking and as a juror for New Zealand Awards, where he's established a reputation as, I think, one of the great charmers, the great storytellers about architecture in this part of the world. And the folk in the middle will no doubt know him as the designer of particularly innovative housing, including the Nightingale projects, which at the University of Auckland are some of the most studied projects by the students. So without further ado, join me in welcoming Andrew Maynard.
Thanks for coming. Hi. So I can work out what to talk about. Students, some hands in the air. How many students we got? And then professional, like people work. Okay, cool. All right, so I can't bullshit because there's some people that know what they're talking about in here. All right, I've got a lot of slides. Hey, nobody ever does this, but I'll offer it anyway. Throw in some questions and heckles along the way. You don't have to say them till the end. Great to see some familiar faces too. Thanks for coming along, guys. Some Archie marathoners that came in January to Japan with us. We had a blast. Yeah, well, didn't we? I hope so. All right, so this is 2016, being on the national jury. What a epic way to see a country being dragged around and, you know, incredible food and drink that New Zealand has to offer, and looking at the best of the year's architecture. Jasper, during the trip, told me about this incredible bike ride that goes from Cape Reinga all the way to Bluff, which, as the crow flies, is 1,400 kilometres, and all cross country. And I thought, that sounds awesome. I'm going to give that a crack. And then in 2018, did that. The worst thing that's ever happened to me, and the best thing that's ever happened to me. Anybody that was following me on Instagram back there, they could see my slow decline into madness doing that. But I've seen so much of this incredible country, and I feel very, very privileged to return again. That's my beloved Kenneth, the bike on that side. This is. I won't read it, I'll tell you about it. So in 2002 I started my practice at 27. I was a notoriously bad employee, always interested in other things, and I just decided that I can't work for other people, so I'd start making shit up myself at far too young. But this image has been with me for a long time, or an image like this. I've done some bad AI to it in the last couple of days. And basically the story of this is, it reminds me of the importance of design, because you don't like it? Is that what I'm hearing? Because this is a story from an old person's home where they kept on having people that lived there, most of them with dementia, disappearing, running off, and they'd always go and find them at the nearest bus stop. So rather than solving it by creating basically a prison, what they did was, in the grounds, they put a bus stop with the sign that everybody recognises from their childhood, and a lovely seat there. This isn't the particular one. And a seat there so that when people went to go home, because they've got dementia and they don't know what's going on, and they go, well, I'm going to go home, they would go and sit at the bus stop. A bus never goes there, and eventually somebody from the home would come out and say, oh, the bus is coming a bit later today, why don't you come back inside for a cup of tea? And by the time they got them back in, they'd totally forgotten they wanted to leave in the first place. And I just think this is a great reminder, especially in the Instagram age, where we get really seduced by the image, and which I understand is incredibly problematic for students as well. Like, well, you want me to do some wobbly object, don't you, in space? The design offers so much more than just the beautiful image. Super quickly, just to give some background, I know some of you that have been before have heard me rant about this, but I thought it'd be interesting, especially for younger practitioners, how I've changed very much my priorities and how I am as a practitioner. Like, when I first started, I wanted to just do little jobs, individual houses, and then do all of these troublemaking polemics, like political things that just poked and prodded. So I did lots of things like parliaments that move so you can mess with the parliamentarians, and buildings that unfold into over laneways, and then you can dismantle them back if somebody from council comes to check it out, or messing with the economics of apartment buildings. What happens if it's constantly reshuffling all day, every day while you're at work? So you had the penthouse one day and the ground floor the next. Using military infrastructure to go and bomb people that need housing, especially during floods. Just these stupid ideas that I had so much fun with. Looking at land bankers, the endless fury to this day about people just sitting on land and letting it appreciate, and lending, just helping the housing crisis along, and then actually creating these sort of playgrounds that you just go and dump on their land. To actually try and activate it and pull down the fences, or giant suburb eating robots that go and reclaim resources from the abandoned suburbs after the peak oil hits. So these are all really fun, while at the same time just working with some great Melburnians and others within other states as well. Deliberately keeping it small and simple, and I started my practice at the same time that my son came into this world, so having a little bub on the desk and then mucking around and keeping things really simple and cheap as well. I come from Tassie, I don't come from a privileged background, so just pay the bills, play with, work on these things, and it's just been really fun. But over time, getting busier and busier as we get more popular. And it's just got to a point over time where, 20 years, a lot's changed. So we've gone from going, gee, houses are expensive, gee, there's a lot of carbon in the air, to there is a housing crisis. We're actually cooking the earth. About time to stop playing with these ideas and actually start to roll up our sleeves and do something more. But we've been having fun with these single res. This is old data and you all know it anyway, but it's really interesting when you look at the affordability scale. 3 is considered unaffordable, 5.1, severely unaffordable. And then when you look at our 3 cities, Melbourne, Sydney and Auckland, look at that. Auckland's basically double severely unaffordable. So it's severely fucked, one would say, in terms. And we're in the similar boat. It's changed around a bit. I think this is about 5 years old. But you get it, nothing's changed. If anything, things have gotten worse. Housing crisis, growing homelessness. I just can't believe we see this in Melbourne. It blows my mind. And of course, the world's on fire. And we know the solution, or a big part of the solution, with the built environment adding 40% of our carbon footprint. We know that the solution is density, but as a young practitioner, I've really resisted it for a long time, because I would have developers come and they'd identified really early on that we had quite a popular brand, but there was probably a lot of people that couldn't afford a single home from us, but they could probably get enough debt to secure an apartment. So they would come to us and they would say, hey, come and do an apartment building. I'd be like, yes, this is awesome, let's house some people. And then I'd come out with all of these ideas and they'd be like, don't just stop it. All we want is your brand, and then you do the stuff you enjoy, which is do the pretty stuff on the outside. The spreadsheets will take care of the rest. And so just said no, time and time and time again. And then I was sort of thinking about the polemical stuff we were doing, which is just navel-gazing, cute, attention-seeking stuff, really. And constantly bitching about somebody needs to do something about the state of housing, and then having Mark Austin saying, we're somebody. Maybe shut up and let's do something about it. And so we decided to do our own. We'd never done multi-res, and we decided to put on the hat not only of the multi-res architects but also as the developer. And we wanted those to have some key principles, which were they had to be deliberative design. So we took our skills of working with individual clients and we spoke to a community about what they felt was important. It had to tackle climate change. It had to be an exemplar of good urbanism and contribute something back to the built fabric. It had to have financial sustainability in terms of the cost effectiveness of it being built, but also the ongoing running cost. And we wanted to democratise capital. We wanted to stop going to the big 4 banks in Australia and all of their sort of investment in fossil fuel. To pause that, though, I'll just talk about the U-turn that I've made in recent years. I just don't talk to architects as much anymore. We are an amazing group that can get in our own little silo, our own little bubble, and have this reinforcing sort of discussion a lot. And what I've found, especially with the help of others, is have conversations outwardly. We have so much to offer. And the big takeaways there were, I'm going to get out into the world. It's real. Melbourne's got this fucking so much fun, brilliant clique of great architects. It's really collegiate and all that, but let's go outwards to try and solve some of these problems. And rejecting archi-speak is something I've always tried to do, because it is a way where architects sort of fortify their position. It was a reaction to the master builders. We will actually go and create this level of language that mystifies people so we seem much smarter than them. There's a great quote that I usually have in here, but get rid of archi-speak so we actually not only... Well, it's down there communicating with the public. We not only tell the public what's important about what we do, but we arm them with the real knowledge of why it's important. Stop creating polemics. It's just not that helpful, really. And I was doing a lot of reading of Peter Singer, and I just realised I should be just doing more projects, earning more money, and then giving away 10% of it. Like, that would solve so many problems. Buying bed nets. One year, I gave away a chunk of cash and it bought all these bed nets. It's just amazing how something like that just with spare change, really, saves so many lives. So stop doing that kind of thing, actually just build stuff. And as I said before, clear, simple language, empowering the layperson not only with the knowledge but their ability to talk about art design as well. We've seen it with Grand Designs. That's, I was lucky to start my practice when I did because Grand Designs was educating people in the tumultuous nature of engaging with the process, and that it'll all be okay at the end, most of the time, but also the value of that, of good design. And that's where Kev and I started doing this as well. Kev he's just such a nerd for architecture. And he's like, all I want to do is go and look at buildings. That's all I want to do. But I'm broke all the time. And I was just like, dude, just run tours and do videos. And he said, do you want to help me? And I was like, yeah. And I'm sort of I pride myself in being a travel vampire. If any of my mates are going anywhere cool, I'm like, where are you going? What flight are you on? And then I just get on their plane. And so we try to make videos that are doing two things. They're talking to the general public, but they're also talking to students, because we're finding that there is a generation of students, I'll say in Melbourne, I don't know whether it's familiar here, that don't know what's going on. They're learning this process of like, I turn up, I pin up on the wall, a bunch of people punch the shit out of me, I get emotional, I walk, nothing went in, and then I go home and I stare at a laptop and go, what's going on? And I'm talking about people tell us that anecdotally right up to fifth year. Like, I've done 5 years of this and I'm about to come out and I think I've learnt this game. I haven't learnt what I need to learn. That's what they're telling us. So we try to help out a little bit and bring things right back to first principles. And then take people on tours. And again, that idea of the Instagram image, the evocative image, taking that away and actually saying, come and stand and get it at a human scale. It's the Alvar Aalto thing. What happens at this scale is the most important thing. Everything else is just industry. And pointing at things, using layman's terms, getting people to touch materials, look at the way materials touch each other, look at the way that buildings interface with public space, with private space. And people just learn so much. And the great thing about this is now there are people from all over the world, and there's lay people as well. We had Kevin from Florida, he rides horses, he's show jumping. It's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, A, I love your channel, and B, I love architecture. And it's like, that's awesome, because the discussions that happened on that last tour were epic, because they were not just, because we got this really great mix where students, graduates, and then people like AT who are running massive, amazing firms. That discussion's really good. But then when you get outsiders as well, it changes the language. There was also Ree that is a nurse. And she's coming on our next one to Scandinavia in June. Like, she's a nurse. She just saves up to come on Archie Marathon tours now. It's awesome. And the places Kev gets it into is amazing. And I try not to think about it too much or look too much. I just, sort of go, take us, Kev. And then we turn up somewhere like this and it's like, holy shit, I never thought I'd get to see this. And then also, so this comes back to education. This is how I studied, and I was really on the fringe of the new technology coming in and 3D technology and all of that. But I always understood that architectural education happened here in the studio. That's where the education happened. That's where the ideas sunk in. That's where the debate, the negotiation, the testing of ideas, the challenge of ideas happened. And then you would go to a lecture to be pulled, sort of to have this big world view. And then you would go into a crit as to be able to articulate everything that was being talked about there. So, and I just hear now that it's about go do your crit or go do your presentation, get the shit kicked out of you, and then go to a lecture which you don't quite understand. And I just think, well, the most important bit is missing out of that. And I understand how it happened, and in Australia it's John Howard's fault, defunding the universities and all that, and this real estate's really important. And of course COVID killed it even further. But what we decided to do, this is the other half of our office, AMA is on one side and Kev is on that side. And we just decided to set up a studio. That's Godsel's RMIT Design Hub over the road. And we just said, to students, come and hang out here. Kev's always here. You can sort of listen, vicariously learn through hearing AMA doing their thing, which everybody's disappointed about because we are head down, bum up, not really talking. And then just constantly getting people to draw things, get off the laptops. And we've got students here from every university in Melbourne. So you get this cross-pollination of ideas, and that's how good ideas are born, is by getting many voices involved. And it's been really successful, and it's just growing more and more. We have these events too, which is awesome. There's this great group called Yimby in Melbourne that's all about Yes in My Backyard, that's really trying to get good housing policy in place, and they come and use the space every Sunday as well, and the students are 24/7, so they can come and overhear those sorts of meetings. We have our own design meetings, AMA do, on that big whiteboard as well, so they can hear that, and some of them even throw in their 2 cents and what do you think of this idea? And I always say, shut up! But hopefully they're learning through that process. Anyway, so that's happening as well, but back to which is fun and awesome, because building buildings can be really, really hard. Anybody in the industry knows that you're just pushing shit uphill a lot of the time, that buildings don't want to be built. Like, it's the second law of thermodynamics. Like, we are in a university is going to entropy, that is in decay. We're trying to reverse that by building things. It's so hard. So I'm like, high fives to anybody that's built a building, as terrible as they may be, because it's amazing that we actually do it. But so we decided to do this going back. We decided to do some housing. Triple bottom line housing. And everybody knows what that means, but I'll point it out anyway. This is typical development, is maximise your financial returns because it's a business, and just do whatever you need to do in sustainability and livability to tick the legislative boxes. It's just about giving all three of those equal priority. So financial returns, because there's investors, sustainability and livability. And we went to all of our past clients and said, hey, we've built you really nice houses and you guys rock and the value of property's gone up so much. Do you want to each kick in 100 grand? And we were amazed. Most of them were like, yeah, if we're going to help house people, let's do it. So we raised $2 million. Even Leon Van Schaik, who's like the granddaddy of sort of Melbourne architecture, was the head of RMIT for a long time, he threw in money, which was amazing as a vote of confidence. And some of our staff threw in money as well to fund this development, which is super surprising because I do not pay them enough money for them to do that. So I've docked most of their wages since. And we found a great landowner who lived in Brunswick, ran his business in Brunswick, and he could have sold up for more, and he wanted to stay there, so he owns one of the apartments now. And he wanted to be proud of what he did instead of just cashing in. He wanted to be part of the solution rather than seeing what everybody else was doing, was selling up to ruthless developers and the grey concrete boxes going up. So in terms of this building, apartments have to face outwards from the site, not in towards each other. I'll skip through this really quickly. The Saxon Street is a really troubled street. It's got a really checkered, terrible history. Violence against women in the street is just phenomenal. It's happened in the past. And the idea of actually activating that street, not having cars there, not having a garage door, actually, having passive surveillance, educating the council in why you shouldn't have setbacks because you want as many people as possible looking down the street. The crazy shit we have to argue with planners. But also looking at the context. Like, so many of these sort of these great sort of Italian and Greek legacy houses are being knocked down because they're not seen to have any value in Melbourne. And then looking up and down Sydney Road, which this building will be on, predominantly 2 stories, lots of different strange arches. And instead of doing that, which is happening everywhere through Melbourne, which is just a generic goddamn box, trying to have a conversation. Like, this is 2 stories versus 6 stories, but actually trying to have a bit of conversation and bring in some greenery because Brunswick's famous for not having any trees. All those wonderful Greek and Italian people just cutting them down and putting concrete. That is verging on racism, I apologise. But the cool thing about this process was getting to know the people first, actually saying to people, AMA is going to do a project here, who's up? And then getting these people together, and we had lots of delays. We ended up with VCAT, which is like, you know, Boom and NIMBYs next door complaining and holding us up and taking us to court and all that. And so many of these people just stuck along with us the whole way, and they told us what they valued, and we pumped that into the design, which is awesome, especially when you do go and argue with council and they say, can you just set that back? Because you go, well, okay, that's Ruhei's apartment you've just deleted. And you actually say to Ruhei in that meeting, how do you feel about that? You're now homeless. So. And the big thing for us with this building is, you know, the housing, like the problem for first home buyers is so significant. You're always tempted to make them as cheap as possible. In this one, we wanted to make really good size homes because we knew a lot of people wanted to have growing families in there. And we're so proud that none of these, for how many years has it been? 4 years? Three and a bit? Nobody sold up and moved out, which some of the Nightingale stuff that we were doing earlier on, you know, people would wait their 1 year out so to avoid their tax implications and sell up and make 200 grand overnight. People are raising their kids here, and because of that, it's fortifying the community even more, which is awesome. But what we found with our 20 apartments that we did at Terrace House is people that didn't want apartments at all. Like, we do not want that. And we can't afford that, and we hate the ongoing maintenance, and we probably need to renovate it. Like, it's just impossible. And so we came out just saying, well, we're going to do terrace houses, the thing that you kind of want to buy, but you don't want the maintenance and all of that. And then you can have your shared costs, shared internet costs, shared power costs. And that comes from the site, because the site's only 10 metres wide by 57 metres long. And we called this indefensive corridors, because that's what good houses actually have thoughtful corridors. You know, this is what's called an efficient apartment. That's a good apartment, essentially, but they're considered efficient because you get 2 bedrooms at a much, you know, at lower square metres of apartment, and we're basically paying for every square metre. Everything's on a square metre rates. Our site kind of forced our hand a bit, and we just went with it. And no developer would do this, would be creating these massive apartments. And we sold them so far under market because we'd stripped out the vast majority of the profit. But if you look at this standard, typical, efficient apartment, there is a corridor. That's a goddamn corridor. They're just calling it living space. And not only that, you're trying to put your kids to bed and you're trying to watch the TV at the same time. It's a nightmare. Like, that's a short-term solution. That's where all you're doing is putting some debt somewhere to wait for that to appreciate so you can leverage off it to get your next property, the real property. We weren't interested in being part of that. That's your corridor. And then the other thing too is you can't sell shared corridors. You want to make those as small as possible because you can only sell the apartment. Everything else comes as a cost to the development. So that's why we see all of these places where you feel like you're going to be killed and you don't want to stop and talk to your neighbours. Like, this is the worst place in the world. Like, and you just grunt at your neighbours and move on. And what we did, again, no developer would do this, is we teased them apart to create this zone in between so that people felt comfortable being at each other's front door. The other great thing is we only have 4 apartments on each level. So instead of all of those doors, we've just got too many people sharing one tight corridor. You've only got 4 families. And the other thing we did was put study spaces at the front door. So you think about the typical terrace house, you come in the front door, bedroom, bathroom, then there's living space. And you all go in that front door and you try to look in those bedrooms. Don't you? Like, admit it, you try to have a sticky beak in the bedrooms. So, and then there's this whole sort of hierarchy of social engagement where if you say to somebody in that arrangement, come hang out with me, you've got to take them through the apartment lobby and everything, up through the stair or lift, all the way past your private spaces into your lounge room to hang out. They're suddenly in charge. They've got the power. Like, it's really hard to then say, can you go now? Like, I just wanted to have a chat and now you're in my space. This idea of putting the apartment, the office right on that social space, right next to the front door, creates what we were trying to create, which is a big problem for most Australians, we think, the front veranda. Like, you look at that and you've got this shared central space, and because there's only 4 doors, even though they haven't paid for it, those sort of walkways that go to the front door become their verandas, and they've become occupied with all this great stuff. And that space they didn't pay for, it's really brutal, as simple as sort of space, so we didn't pay extra for it. And then we put those study spaces with windows in them so they can all be kind of like, hi, how you going? Or pull down the blind and be like, fuck off, I don't want to talk to you today, or whatever it is. But there's an actual, and the social engagement then is much more informal, and you can retreat. The front yard does that really well for us, and people in Australia, and I'm sure here as well. There's something great about the power dynamic there. Oh, hi, Marjorie, great to see you, sort of thing. And there's boundaries in between. You can be really social and be like, I think I can hear that, the kettle or the kid, and you can disappear. And so we're always trying to bring this into all of our work, but especially for apartments, because culturally, I think it's the only way we can stop people from going, apartments are stepping stones to a freestanding house. And, I'm really proud of what we've done there at Terrace House and get these great interactions. And it's also the personalities that we attracted, like Paula and Fitz, that you can see the two kids up there. They're just like the most lovable people, and the front door's directly below them. So they're just always out there going, hi, hi, hi. Gets a bit annoying, but it's good. I had one resident that came up to me, 2 weeks they'd been in the building, came up to me just furious and just going, Maynard, it takes me to get from this front gate to my door, it takes me 40 minutes. Because everybody's stopping. There's always these little places we've strategically put, like, look how cheap that is. But strategically, there's a bench seat out the front of the gate and on the sort of secure side of the gate. Next to the lift, there's a bench as well. There's always a place to stop and perch, and people just find themselves going, shit, he's got me again. Like, he's forced me to stop and talk to my neighbours. No, I didn't. Like, you're just a nice person. And look how simple all of that is. So you think about the typical developer render and the people having cafe lattes and, expensive this and that. We all know, and it's just like the bus shelter, good design comes from really thoughtful interaction with people and their emotions and their basic needs. And if you can think about that, you can solve some pretty big issues. Look at it, it's just so raw and simple. If you want people to use sustainable transport, put the bikes right near the front door, don't put them in a basement. If you want people to use the stairs, make sure that as you walk in, you can actually see the stairs, not the lift. So they might take that as a way to go up and down. We kicked the youngest person living there, we paid to create these graphics because it's just a fire stair that we put a glass on one side to give it a bit of life. And we made it as sustainable as possible, like 8.2 stars. Now there's massive, incredible air tightness. It's basically passive house level without sort of the onerous last sort of 10%. No heating or cooling in the building. There's no air conditioner, there's no heating. It's ERV, so we're constantly doing energy recovery, constantly moving fresh air through this building, but doing heat exchange, so you're not losing much energy. In summer, the sprinklers, the misters drop sort of the temperature of those light wells by about 10 degrees, and that's where we bring all of the air in to go into those ERVs, so you're constantly in summer bringing in cooler air. No heating or cooling, and we had a German energy consultant, and he just did all the calculations on how much the fridge, because we got Fisher and Paykel to help us out with stuff, and how much energy they produce, how much the standard TV, the human body, and they were really confident that in winter, cold Melbourne winter, there would be enough energy pumping into this. And look at the power bills. So most of the cost is meterage, so you compare that to the average in Victoria, $137 per month. That's the average. So ongoing affordability in terms of running costs is incredible. We use far less concrete. I could talk about this for ages, but we had a great builder where we really thought about getting so much of that carbon out of the concrete process. We originally wanted to be CLT, but we just couldn't make it happen because of the fire regs. The builder offset all of the construction process, which was brilliant. It's all electric. We did external sun protection. You just have to do that because this building faces east-west. But we did that on the outside of the balcony, so when it's down, you're not just internalised, you're actually capturing that outdoor space. Low VOC materials, master switches, all of it's thought about in such a massive way. And then just, no cars. I'm not a no-car person. Like, cars are really important to especially people that are very disadvantaged or single parents, things like that. But it's about good urbanism. This area has just got so much public transport in it, and it meant that we could then not have the garage door, we could activate the street. I love this stat. So the carbon impact compared to a standard typical building of this scale, 100 million balloons of CO2 removed from the atmosphere over the life of the building is what it's estimated to be. Stoked. Anyway, I'm not watching time, so Andrew, you'll kick me off when I go too long.
Keep going.
Woo! So that, yep.
Can you tell us about the villa on the top?
Oh, good question. So, what many of our clients are surprised about, we're bloody rationalists. They expect us, like in our first few meetings, to be all like, woohoo! And we're like, this is the planning code, and this is the sun, this is how we do it. And so these are all planned incredibly rationally. I could talk about this building forever. In terms of all of the bedrooms, all the bathrooms, the kitchens, all line up vertically straight through the building. So there's mass efficiency there. But because of the setbacks, you'll get slightly different living spaces. And we took that efficiency to the roof as well, where we knew two of the families wanted 3-bedroom homes. So on those ones, they've got exactly the same plan, but where there's sort of some cupboard space that we put in the corridor, that becomes a stair, and then we just put these little, AMA, little cute sort of shacks on top, and that becomes the master bedroom up there. But but there's only 2 3-bedders in the mix of 20 homes.
So you can live the suburban dream on top of your apartment.
Yeah. I really wanted to put a Hills hoist up on there, and nobody else was interested. And that took us to ParkLife, which is part of the village. So a whole bunch of us getting together. So Claire next door to us, Claire Cousins, Hayball, Breathe, Architecture, Kennedy Nolan's. You guys probably all studied this. It's been very popular. And we got to do the biggest building there, 36 apartments. And again, just like the Terrace House, actually have a look at the context. And just like the Greek and Italian sort of legacy houses, the things that people consider not of value typically until there's a generational change and people go, holy shit, I love those when I was a kid, where have they all gone? So just looking at what we were knocking down and bringing that into the language of the building, and also the scale of the building, using it in very AMA ways that we've been doing for 20 years, getting big things and breaking down into like an accretion of masses. And doing what we often do, which is deal with levels of transparency as well, to create a building. This one to Duckett Street, so to the south, where we have some setbacks. And then, of course, the inevitable arguments with council. For 20 years I've had this saying, I always say it in the office, work with the problem rather than against it, like no room for tantrums. Like if it's a thing and it's not ideal, how do we turn it into something awesome? And one of those things is that amphitheatre up on the corner, which I'll come back to. Levels of transparency, the bird cages, stuff like this, we were really worried about whether people would like it. But the great thing about deliberative design is we can really talk to these people. We know who they are before they've even signed a sales contract. Like, are you okay with this? Look, you get far less balustrading and great view back to the city and all that. In Terrace House, you probably noticed that this in-between space had handrails. And we were like, everybody just move in there and like put couches there and tables and stuff. And of course, as soon as you put a couch or a table next to a balustrade, that balustrade is no longer compliant. And if you've got a building full of kids, they jump up and down on the couches, 6 stories up, and you're like, fuck. And so here we just use the netting straight through so you can just, a bit safer. We learn. There's 6 doors on each of these landings. So there's a little bit more shared space around these verandas, as I call them. And that's Claire's building, Claire Cousins' building on that side. And that's the west out there. So you get these, if you follow any of us online, you've probably seen these incredible sunsets coming roaring through there. It's epic. So basically with ParkLife, it's a north building and a south building, which is just like Terrace House, where it was an east and west building with this in-between space. And that in-between space being that social space again, instead of that dodgy corridor. But the great thing about working together with other people, so each of the architects, we were the architects on our buildings, but we were also, just like the Terrace House model, were the developers of each of those buildings. So Claire was pretty much doing her own building. We'd agreed shared services and things like that, so we're sharing like the internet and all of the services and the solar and the embedded energy network. But stuff like this, it's amazing how it seems really straightforward. Like, let's line up our light wells. So we've got much bigger light wells, and her site was much thinner than ours, and it just messed with her plans so much. So this turned into just like weeks of us rejigging each other's plans trying to line up light wells. Best intentions when it comes down to dirty reality is so you just see why, a standard profit-driven developer, they're business people, will just be, I don't give a shit. Like, just move on. You've got a compliant light well, tick. And then the northern facade, which typically we would have to do one of these ugly setbacks, but because we decided to save Alan, the tree there, we actually gave up 3 metres of space. We went to council and said, we could either get rid of that, pull our bottom facade out, give you your 3-storey street wall, setback, and then you don't have passive surveillance. It's a northern facade. You don't want to have setbacks anyway. Thank God they went, yes, please keep that tree. And we're now trying to do this with other development. Like, this is in every bit of sort of government literature now about an exemplar. And every time we propose a 6 or 7 storey wall next to a park, we're going through this at the moment, are we? Like, they're like, no, where's your street wall? And we're like, our building in your documents says that's an exemplar, and yet we have to do it like... Welcome to my world. That's Claire. It's 2 of our staff bought into this building as well. So, like, which is awesome. That's the Commons in the background there. So by Breathe Architecture, that started off so much of like, build it and they will come. Somebody's got to build it. These ideas for people to sort of invest in them or understand that they're worthwhile. Borrowing from MVRDV, and instead of trying to detail everything really tightly, just saying to the trades, put it where it needs to go, to an extent. Like, it's not really fair to Mark Austin and Mark Strannan, who are out on site all day, just like, don't put it there. But essentially, keep it loose so we really drive down the labour costs and tie it all together by painting it the same colour. And other things too, like everybody else was fighting so hard for these floor-to-ceiling glazing. Like, you look at Claire's and it's really beautiful. But we ended up with 9.1 star Nathers here. Like, it's considered the most sustainable apartment building, this particular one in the village in Australia. And we calculated how much glass would give us the best thermal outcome. It seems a weird way to design. And then we designed that amount of glass in, like there was an economy of glass. And so we ended up with just I think it's 2.4, and we just did this detail across, and everybody that lives there bloody loves it. They're like, oh, it's just love building pot plants and everything like that up, and it's just the perfect amount of light. So it was good feedback that maybe sometimes sort of the perfect architectural idea of, isn't exactly what people want or need in their life, and you can get some other wins in some other ways. The really interesting thing too about both of these communities is we were asking them, like, what kind of AMA stuff do you want? And they were like, just take it easy. Like, it was really good. It was actually exciting. We can do all this stuff with cabinetry. And they're like, keep it white. Like, we'll come and bring our lives and put it into this. Like, just create a canvas for us. I love it. It took the pressure off too. So instead of having to decorate too much, it was like, okay, we just make it work. And so all of the shared spaces are like this yellow going through it. And then the amphitheatre was where we had 2 more houses. And the council said, just get rid of those 2 houses so we've got, so it lines up with the building next door. And we're like, why? And they're like, because it's a thing. We like lining up with stuff. And it's like, it doesn't matter. The whole street's doing this. This is what healthy streets do. And again, instead of fighting, we just went, all right, and we showed them the maths. You just put up everybody's apartment, like we have to pay for this loss of yield. You just put up everybody's apartment by $40,000. It's like, no, we didn't. We just wanted a setback. Like the cognitive dissonance of the actions that council force versus the loss of yield, so what it does to affordability. And also we're increasing surface area there. So you're getting more surface area to lose that exposes sort of the thermal mass of the building. Nah, we just want our setback. And so instead of throwing a tantrum and instead of going, screw it, we'll just put colour bond on there and we lose this one, we spent a little bit extra and we turned it into something. And thank God the community loves it, because it was also a bit of a gamble. What if they don't use this? But there's been weddings and stuff there. A few of the people in the building turn up every morning and have a cup of coffee there and chat. So it's turned out to be something really beautiful. 9.1 stars, again, the only building in the village with no heating, no cooling. The same, we tried to do so many things in Terrace House. You know what it's like. What's the quote? In the amateur's mind, there are endless possibilities. In the experts, there are very few possibilities. Like, it's great actually going, shit, we tried all that stuff and almost went broke. Here we're going to try 5 things and do them really well. And it just made a better building. Don't tell the people that live in Terrace House that I said. Don't let them know I said that. And the cool thing about this building, and again, we had an entirely different sustainability strategy than the other 5 buildings, and that's that we try to get rid of the concrete. So we used this insulated panel, which gave us, it's basically an elaborate esky, and we didn't have concrete blade walls. Instead, it was just a post and plank sort of system. But anyway, the other good thing is across the village we had 20% affordable housing. Awesome. And that was Housing Choices, and so teaming up with the housing provider and carbon neutral in operation. And with the village, that sort of concludes the original Nightingale. And was during that process of the village, there was some ugliness that happened. And our founding CEO, Jesse, left, as well as a few others of us. But the legacy is really important that she and many of us that aren't involved in it anymore have left. But this idea of having that triple bottom line and making something replicable that you can repeat. Look at the legacy. So Nightingale 1 by Breathe, Nightingale 2 by 6 Degrees. You've got Brunswick East, which is by CHC, and Sophie, who now runs AMA, actually, she was a developer. She was client side. She actually, this was her project. So as a developer, rolling up her sleeves and delivering sustainable, cost-effective housing. It is, and of course, because of inflation, it is and will forever be the most cost-effective Nightingale that was ever built. Terrace House started its life as a Nightingale until the ugliness, and then we pulled it. And regional areas as well. So Breathe did one in Ballarat as well, which is cool. But it did what it was meant to do. So Nightingale Housing, we always talked about it being the disruptor, not the answer. Like, the biggest part of the original Nightingale was to educate architects, so actually get us to, instead of being utopian and saying this is the way things should be, is to actually get dirty and realise how bloody hard it is. And deliberative design, actually get involved with people and ask what they want instead of a real estate agent telling you what the market wants. And related to that, but more important, and this is the greatest legacy, is empowering purchasers to demand more. Giving knowledge about what a good house and a good apartment is, and then going out into the marketplace and just saying, when a real estate agent says 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, be like, yeah, but what is its energy rating? Like, is it got an embedded network? And what is its communal spaces like? That was the whole purpose of the original Nightingale. And we always said, and I can remember Jeremy saying it many times, like in 10 years, hopefully we can just fold the whole thing and it can disappear. It's turned into something else that's now using that name and trying to leverage off the village, but it's now a developer. But the cool thing is that the development manager, Hip versus Hype, these brilliant people who were so fundamental to how we set up the original Nightingale, and they were the development managers of 1 and 2. We're working with them now to do ParkLife 2, which is just next level. We've got some 10-star homes in there. It's between 2 parks. So ParkLife 2, because it's between 2 parks. The other ParkLife's got 1 park. And I've created this tagline, twice the park, twice the life. And now we're really leveraging on the whole 80s thing, like the sequels are always better, like Empire Strikes Back, am I right? And thank God that Hip versus Hype, it's really their project. We're just being engaged as the architects on here, that they're really into it. This one I'm incredibly proud of, and it's probably, it's more useful in many ways. Like we talk about the missing middle. I don't know whether you use that term here, but in Melbourne, it's just rings of suburbs. What do we do about, how do we get density into predominantly single-storey freestanding homes? This was by Lucent, who, again, was Lucent back in the day, client side. This was the last project we did with Sophie until we stole her away, and now she's the managing director of AMA. And this is really interesting because, they'd helped so much with us in terms of professionalising the way that we did development. Panos from Lucent, who was Soph's business partner, helped us secure the building contract for the village. And they said, this is cool, you're doing all this stuff in Brunswick. You guys have been to Brunswick, most people? Yeah? No? Yeah. It's not that good. It's cheap. I see nodding over there, like, yeah, it sucks. And so they came to us saying, we've got to do something about millennial Southside migration. And I'm like, they actually use the term refugee. Like, what do we do about all these people? It's so expensive south of Melbourne that there's a couple of generations that are like, bye mum, bye dad, like I'm moving to Brunswick or Preston, I'm moving north. And the reality is they're doing that because it's cheaper. And we're trying to provide a product in Brunswick because we could get cheaper land prices to provide this housing. So the great risky thing for ostensibly a traditional developer that wanted to, I think the tagline was leave it better than you found it. Can we bring those ideas down to Brighton, where it is incredibly conservative area, politically incredibly conservative area? Everybody said no, nobody will be interested in that. They just want luxury, whatever that means. So many bad examples in that area of just the generic boxes going in. And if you look from 2009 versus today, all of those have been development sites where it was predominantly single-storey homes and just these same grey concrete boxes going up. And so the NIMBYs, the locals, getting really up in arms, council getting very defensive. And our site was right next to one of the most important, Cardinia House, one of the most important heritage homes in the area. Great heritage in the area. So we agree. The idea of just more generic concrete boxes going up is wrong, but we do need density. So we went to council and said, that's what you're expecting us to do? And they're like, yeah, no, we know we need density, but please don't do that. And we said, well, look, but how do you do bigness, they're saying, in a place where there isn't bigness? And we said, you do have bigness. Like, there are Anglican, Catholic, there are multiple churches, many churches in this area that have a scale that basically fits with your planning code. And we said, we're going to bring that scale here. So essentially there isn't an argument about bigness versus single story. Like, because we're just using, and of course, I know a lot of students get pissed off by where's your site analysis. Site analysis and responding to something concrete is where the good ideas come from. Yeah? Like actually digging in and going, what is here, mining that is so often where you can do something meaningful instead of just landing a spaceship. And so we went to council and they were just like, holy shit, just go. And it was the easiest planning, well, it's not quite true, but it's the story I like to tell. It was the easiest planning process. And so we turned 2 homes into 14 sustainable, fossil fuel free, all these things that people like, the market won't want that, they want their gas burners. And then just showing council these, like that's your maximum height limit. If you think about overshadowing and visual bulk and things like that, if we tune those down and we cut through some circulation and we add some fenestration, they love to say, but balconies and articulation, then essentially we've got a scale that is like the church in the areas, but it also is essentially your built planning code. You know, are you going to get in the way or not? They did a bit. That's their job. And so we did 14 houses, 8.2 stars again. Yeah, fossil fuel free, 15 kilowatts of solar, all the good stuff in there. There are cars you don't need cars anywhere, but, you didn't need cars here, but the market did demand it. I totally get that. Although it's amazing, it did become a sales thing. Like you go down the basement and it's basically empty and there's just like electric bikes and storage and surfboards in the car parks, which is epic. And the funny thing is that so many people that live in the area think it's just one rich dude's house. It blows my mind. And council, like you talk to some planners as well, and I've said, we put 14 homes there. And they're like, what? Where there were 2 homes. 8.2 stars is a higher NAVIS rating than we had for the village, which just took out every sustainability or whatever. And in this area where they're doing lots of luxury concrete boxes and super high-end stone and all that, this is the only development that has sold out 100% in the last 5 or maybe more years. There's so much surplus stock. So really proud of that. And the good thing about this is the government and people like that are looking at it going, holy shit, we didn't know what to do with all of these, single-story, quarter-acre block sites. Maybe this is the way we can do it. Like, it doesn't have to be either or. It can be both and. Borrowing materials from the area. I won't talk about that too much. No, I won't talk about it at all. The other cool thing, and again, essentially in function, we're talking about a traditional developer, but really interesting the learnings that came from them being involved in the first Nightingale things. 2 penthouses sold for gigabucks, and then these, like, look at these plans. They're great homes. Like, the bedrooms are not directly off the living spaces. You've got opening both ends, so you could get through breezes. Like, they're excellent apartments. $1.2 million in Brighton. $1.2 million is a lot of money. In Brighton, it's so cheap. And that's because we had a developer that, and it worked as a sales strategy as well, get in and get some pre-sales, but leveraging some of the penthouse stuff to allow some other people to get in. So basically it means that people that couldn't afford to stay near mum and dad could now stay near mum and dad and their support networks. Very proud of that, because unlike the other stuff where we basically just pulled out the profit that we would have taken, so we created sort of this fiction and then everybody else, sells up and, makes their money. This is basically a 15%, profit return to a developer, but it's still doing all these good things. Why? Okay, we can all have an argument about capitalism, and I'm there with you. But the reality is that's the system we're in. If we want to deliver housing now, it needs to go through a market that's delivering a return to the people that are providing the capital. So hopefully that's related to New Zealand, and I think in many parts this would be too. Like, how do you build apartments in regional areas? I'm sure that so many of you have come up against this. Like, somewhere like Bendigo that is urbanising quickly, this site that we bought, again with one of the early collaborators in Nightingale that got the hell out of there as well, they funded it, we've designed it in this incredible precinct. Great homes, 17 homes, a heritage home as well that we've got, really great sustainability outcomes. And we've had it priced to build $550,000 per box. That's the construction price. So you've got to add on top all your other prices, all your other costs, your architect's fee and everything else. So it goes up from there. But that's our quote. That's what's interesting about per box as a construction rate. You can drive out of town in 8 minutes. And there's a 3-bedroom home. We're all architects sitting here and we all go, well, I'll tell you why that's not a good enough home. But the reality is it's a big home on a big block with space for the kids to run around, and there's 3 bedrooms. Look at the price. $530 to $575. In regional areas, how do you build apartments? When you've got all the same code, you've got all the same onus fire regulations on it. How do you build? And well, the answer is you can't. Like, if people are willing to drive out of town, they're going to do it. And we can't even hit these prices. It's changed since I last gave this talk. That's where the price we were trying to hit. Epic homes. But really, I can just go down the road and get something more. That, I'm sure, is similar here as it would be in Australia. But we ended up with a bunch of people that were real purchasers. Most of them were downsizers, selling up their property. So, most of them were economically and were the same age. And that's all great and all fine. And we were, and then we were approached by a local housing provider that just said, can we buy the whole lot off you? And we're going to pull out some of the quality because we need to hit a price point, but can we actually buy the development? Because it's probably, I don't know actually if it's still like this, you've had to change the government. But, basically the funding going into housing means that for some of these community housing providers to provide social and affordable housing, it's easier for them to just buy whole developments. All right, so we are talking a lot. So we've got a practice of 10 people, deliberately small, nimble, special forces unit, I always say. Like, just these incredible people. My staff, I'm always saying to them, you could run your own practice. And they're like, yeah, but we see the hell you go through, so we're not going to do it. But great people. But what's brilliant, though, is that we're talking to all levels of government. They want to know, like, how, as like an award-winning designer, but you've also gone through the brutal economics of providing housing. How do we do it? And so we've got great projects like this where government is unlocking land where typically they would have gone into a PPP, or they would have gone to a developer and just said, here you go, and developer just does Docklands. And actually going, how do we do this? I'll skip through this really quickly. This is a presentation that I gave to one sort of middle ring suburb council. They said, how would we do it? We own all this land, and instead of going out to traditional developers, how could we do it? And I was just saying, this is how we did it. Create a development entity, get a great architect, great development manager, build housing. That's overly simplified by so much, but like just be the client was the message we were saying. Like just engage great architect, great development manager. That's what we did. We created a development entity. We hired the best architects in town. Sorry. And Armitage Jones, brilliant emerging sort of development managers. It's beside the point, but I love the fact that the business owners, their team were all women at the time as well. And we got in, we did that. Fontic was the development manager for each of the 6 sites at the village. And we were saying that for government at all levels to develop their own land, they need to rethink this word risk. Like risk is a word that developers use to scare away people. Go, I'll take on the risk. But they use it in 2 ways. For that tactically, but risk also for them means opportunity. Like it is real risk too. Like a developer can take a massive loss, but also there is potential massive uplift. And we were just saying, that's fine. They're business people. That's their job. Like they're producing a product. And they turn that opportunity or that risk into profit. And if you do it yourselves, you can then, like we were doing where we pulled the profit out as much as we could, you can go and invest in other things. We just drove the sales costs down to under market. That was what we did. But as a council, you can then go and put in a childcare centre or more medical facilities or sporting facilities. You can actually have those surplus funds that would become profit and do something else with it. Or just simply drive down the cost. And so the barriers, what are the barriers for anybody wearing the developer hat to producing housing, okay? Or the barriers to this, like what are the barriers, like why isn't every single thing prioritising affordability, sustainability and the rest, and community? And the reason is the big risky items. Access to land, super hard, people are land banking, even though costs have gone crazy everywhere, nobody's dropping the price of their land. The council owns that land, that's like tick, gold star. That already de-risks the process. Planning approval, this long war that happens that costs, like Terrace House, it costs $120,000 that just got lumped onto the price of housing, just fighting this war with council and the local neighbours. You can de-risk that because you're the goddamn council. Like just make a decision. And pull out all of that money. Access to capital, well, that's a question mark, but if you've got unencumbered land, you can leverage off that land to fund your own development, and then you avoid the early investor, like our early investors, these lovely clients of mine and that, they got back 12% return on their money. Thank God they trusted us, but the reality is they got a pretty yummy return. If they leverage their own land to develop it, they pull out that straight away. So they've really got goals in terms of... I never thought I would talk about this stuff when I started my practice, okay? Debt to equity splits. It was the moment I said that in a meeting one day and I was like, holy shit, who will I become? But the reality is, what do designers and architects do? We get constraints and we try to work magic with them. And so often those constraints are competing with each other. There's no easy way to do anything. And the finances are a constraint. Gravity's a constraint. And if you roll up your sleeves and get involved in the spreadsheets, you can actually do more creative and critical thinking. It becomes a design task in itself. Sorry, digressing. And then sales. You can de-risk sales by, if you've got a brand like ours, straight away it does, because people will be like, I want one. But building communities, and councils should be good at that. Or don't sell it, just own it as an asset and build to rent. So this council, we're saying that's all the barriers to development. And it's amazing that you guys have ticks across the board, because most traditional developers, and what we did as well with ours, we didn't have any of that. We're like, just sort of wishing a prayer is what we started with. We didn't have any of that to start with. So if you don't have any of that, sustainability and community and all the rest, that'd be nice if we can tack that on at the end. But we've got to think about survivability to start with. So I was just saying to this council, you have a winning hand. I know it's scary, but God, you're so far ahead. Just please play it. And now, as we entrench further in the housing crisis, it's not please play it. It's like you're obliged to play it. You own these assets. You own this land. You must put housing on it. How to do it Enable an ethical delivery team. So that goes back to what I was saying before. Good architect, good development manager, create a development entity that has really great governance, that has all the things that a council should be delivering in terms of their housing, and you make it then at arm's length so you de-risk the council. You already have that ahead of you, and just start building homes. Just be the client. This is the problem. I think a lot of governments get really freaked out because they don't have embedded expertise. Just hire that expertise. Be the client. That's what used to happen in the 50s and 60s, and then hopefully there's surplus money where you can have, you could have childcare, health, or anything like that, or you could start a housing fund. So if you accidentally went and made 6% or 10% because you had your contingency there and you got most of it back, put it into a housing fund to fund the next development. Again, you're not borrowing money, so you're not feeding back debt to banks or investors. It becomes a cascading win where you can build house after house after house. None of this is new. They used to do it post-war. It was called social housing. And so we're doing that now. We're working directly with, we're essentially with we're just engaged as architects that know how to do this stuff. So there's a bit more confidence. This one's amazing because they came to us with 57 pretty typical 3-storey walk-up stud frame homes with just drive your car up to the front of each one of them. And we said you could do that, or you could put a shitload more homes, 200 and something homes I think we've got on there. That will fund a basement where you can put all the cars underneath and then get more green space around here and introduce 2 parks into it. And then all of this will be given to a community housing provider. So there's no speculation, there's no for-profit element to it at all. And this is going to happen. It's so exciting. The other thing we're doing too, like in northern New South Wales, there's a council there that's just flying us up to run charrettes with the local community. They've got some surplus land, and they're actually, we just go up and we meet with the community and many different stakeholders and actually draw outcomes there on the spot. Instead of talking about it, and so one guy there, Dale, is a lawyer, retired lawyer, and he's always sitting like that saying, this is what should happen. And I eventually got him. It's like, take the pen and draw something. So we actually all dip in and we draw outcomes. And the great thing about having somebody like Sophie there is she can pretty much run the metrics on those straight away. So it's like, everything should be a freestanding house. Right, well, every house is now $4 million. No, it doesn't. But if you actually go and put 3 stories on there and do, hundreds of houses, the cost drops to this. So it means you've got informed decision-making at that meeting. So you trim down all the bureaucracy. It's been absolutely amazing. Look, and then we're doing other cool shit. I wanted to show you this one. Okay, this is the last one. Everybody wake up, we're almost there. I saw the nappers, you motherfuckers. That was you, AT, I saw you. This one in Townsville. So we're doing projects all over the place. We've potentially got one in LA that could be epic. This one's in Townsville, and it's fun. Like this doctor who is just like, what I do every day drives me crazy. I want an off-the-hook house. And he's bought this incredible site, and it's like, my views, you have to protect the views. And I'm like, bro, I've got you. And so the rule here is there's no columns. Shut up. There'll be columns, okay? Everything has to be in the floor. Nothing pokes out. It's so much fun. And so he's like rang me on stage. I'm in Melbourne. He's like, how's it going? Should we have an online meeting? And I was like, I'm going to come to Townsville. I want to talk to you about this because I just didn't want him to say, you're an idiot, you're fired, on Zoom. So I flew up there and he's like, let's do it. I was like, holy shit. So we're going to do this. There will be columns. So much fun. So we're still doing this stuff. We're still doing expensive houses for rich people, and it's great fun. But we're also trying to house as many people as possible. Like at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is just build homes and build resilient homes, build sustainable homes. And there's arguments that can be made, but the reality is you die one day. So we're trying to also have fun as well as smash our heads against the difficulties of density, creating density. Thank you so much for putting up with me. I appreciate it.